I wish you could see what I see. I mean, maybe you can from your own vantage point. This is such a beautiful room of human beings, and I'm so honored to be with you today to talk about some real stuff. You ready for that? I knew you would be. All right, so I have a question for you. When was the last time you got really honest with yourself about who you are? Thinking about that for a moment. Until about 10 years ago, I was clear. I thought I knew myself. I knew my roles. I was a daughter, wife, mother, CEO. I thought, yeah, this is who I am. I was daughter to conservative, traditional parents growing up in the South. I was the youngest of 3 in my family, and I was loved, nurtured, and protected. I didn't really have to think much about who I am over that time. I was married to Chuck. We have an amazing son, Luke. We lived in this beautiful home in a nice neighborhood. We had fulfilling careers, all the things. I was CEO of a large nonprofit arts organization. It's a position that I went after. I wanted it, and I loved it. I was on top of my game. From the outside, my life looked great. And on the inside, it looked pretty good too. So good, in fact, that I never felt the need to slow down and take a closer look. Why would I? It was pretty perfect. And so this is when I began to think, let's just not look too closely, shall we? Not a good thing. But then, in 2012, I opened Pandora's box. It was the year in my life that I seriously began contemplating, who am I? Really. So the situation in 2012, it all began when I started a coach certification program. So I had just started my own business about a year prior. It's called Raven Group. And a core part of my business is executive coaching. And so I started this company about 12 years ago. And when I did, I thought, well, if I'm going to be offering executive coaching as part of this work, I feel like I need some credentialing in it. I need to be certified, a certified coach. So that's what I did. I went to coach certification. So I was there, mind you, for professional development. I had no idea the impact this program and the work of training to be a coach so I could coach others had no idea the impact it was going to have on me in my whole life, not just professionally. So I'm in this program. It's day 1. We were meeting in person over a weekend to get it started, and it was the morning of day 1. And I come into the room in the hotel where we gathered, and I'm pouring myself a cup of coffee. I'm starting to meander the room and meet peers that would become my friends and colleagues over the next 18 months. And we took our seats in this circle. There were about 15 of us. And the facilitators that morning, they asked us a couple of questions. And this is when it began. They asked, "What are you longing for?" And then they asked, "What difference would you like in your life? How would you like for your life to be different?" I sat there a minute. I considered this, and I thought, I'm heavy into my business startup. It is taking everything I've got, and I want it to because I started this thing, and I love it. So it was taking my time, my effort, my energy, my passion. I didn't really have anything left over in myself to give to anyone else. I certainly wasn't thinking about what else I longed for. I'm in it. I'm fulfilling that, right? Yeah. So that's what I thought. And so I sat there pondering the questions that they asked, and I was looking around the circle slowly at all my peers. And you know what I thought? I thought, maybe you're longing for something, but I'm good here. And now I'm looking out at you in this room, and I'm thinking, maybe you're sitting there looking back at me and going, yeah, I'm good here. I'm not longing for anything. But maybe you are. Maybe you are. So I decided with this program, it's really important to me, I decided to lean into it, even though these questions didn't really resonate with me in that moment. And so we began the work. We began the work of taking a look at core values. Have you ever done that? You know, taking a look at what's important to you. And then they had us explore our inner wise woman self, which I don't know about you, but I never even knew I had that inner wise woman self. And then exploring the purpose of my life. Okay, so just some light, simple stuff here, right? And this, my friends, changed everything. It changed everything. So a few months into that coaching program, we would gather every few weeks for a weekend. There was a moment, so tiny, yet so profound, that really had me getting honest with who I am. And so this moment was, I was paired up with a peer in the program, and we started doing some coaching together, some peer coaching. And he was coaching me, and I don't even remember the question he asked, but I remember what I said. Out of nowhere, I responded to him, "My life is so boring." I was like, where did that come from? Remember? I was just telling you how perfect my life was. I was married. We had this amazing son, Luke, fulfilling careers. We had it all. What could be so boring about perfect? Yeah, and I sat there with that. And then my classmate, he opened that box. He says, "Well, what's so boring about it?" And I thought, it just feels so predictable. So predictable. I don't know if you know that movie, The Truman Show with Jim Carrey. That's what came up to me. Like, I just feel like I'm just on repeat or something. And it seemed like my life or our life was just like everybody else's lives around us. You know, our friends and other families like ours. It was a good life. But suddenly just felt so boring. And as I spoke these words, I actually felt really ticked off at myself for even feeling this way. I felt, how could you be so ungrateful? And this is that internal challenge where you feel something that feels real to you, like boring, but then you feel ungrateful. And so it keeps you from ever turning inward and processing stuff, right? So all of that prompted me to realize, oh boy, yeah, there's some internal work here that I need to do. I thought I was perfect, but yeah, I got to take a look. I got to get really honest with me. So as it turned out, my classmate, Anthony, wasn't done with me yet. He did not just work with me to break open this huge realization and then walk away. No. He said, "So Jeannie, what do you want to do about it?" And this voice, y'all, this voice came out of me. I have no idea where it came from. And suddenly it's like I belted it out. "I want to go skydiving." And I was like, where did that come from? Now, I had thought about skydiving before. You know, it's like I wanted it on my bucket list even, but it was something that I was so terrified of doing, even though I really wanted to do it, that I never had the courage to do it. But this voice came out of me, "I'm going skydiving." Yeah, so what it pointed to in me is that there was something in me that desperately wanted to be alive, desperately wanted to get out of that boring, that predictability, so much so that I would be willing to jump out of an airplane to do it. So in my book, you have some of these at your table, I tell the story of going skydiving for the first time. And although skydiving was the event, I mean, it was absolutely thrilling and terrifying, and I think that's really what I was drawn to about it. That you could both simultaneously inside yourself want something so badly, but be so scared to do it that you don't ever do it. So I said, I think I wanted to prove to myself that I could do that. So I did. And so skydiving became this huge metaphor for me in life. And in fact, I've been several times since. It's probably about time I go again. I'm starting to feel that. But skydiving was the event, but what really was the catalyst for this, looking in and starting to do some things about myself, was that question, what are you longing for? That's what began to really undo me and got me to looking at myself, being really honest with myself, and getting to the core of it. So it reminds me of that quote by Amelia Earhart that says, use your fear. It can take you to the place where your courage hangs out. So, now that I'm waking up, guess what? I began to see. And when I began to see, I began doing something about what I saw. Lots of somethings, actually. And what I saw were a few things. I was running. I was running from so many things in my life for so long. First, I was running from my sexual identity of claiming who I am as a gay woman. And then I was running from my marriage. I felt so empty and unfulfilled in this perfect marriage. And I knew that it was time to address that. And I'd been running from my parents. So those parents, that upbringing of that narrow, closed belief system, that even though here I am, an adult woman in the middle of my life, it still clung to me. I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but that conditioning of the upbringing is really strong. So I feared standing up for who I am and confronting that. And so once I saw all those things and knew that I was running, and I literally took up running at that time. Isn't that an interesting thing? Another metaphor for me in life. Yeah. And so one by one, I began to do the deep work of looking at what is underneath all of this running. What's here? So, okay, this gay thing. I was terrified of being gay and openly out. My conservative upbringing had such a tight grip on me. And when I imagined living my true self, like what I knew deep down inside, I was absolutely terrified. I'm like, how can I possibly do this? I'm in a marriage of over 25 years. I have this beautiful, precious family that I loved more than anything. I mean, we had really grown up together, my husband, son, and I. We just grew up together. All the life grows up around you. You know, your careers, you've built off that all this. In some cases with my own life, it was all this safety and security and love and structure. And I'm like, how can I just walk away from this? And also knowing my parents would, oh my goodness. Yeah, I won't even go there with you today. We don't have enough time for that. But I didn't know how to do it. But I want you to know that even despite being so scared, there was something I began to realize that enabled me to move from that fear to actually taking an action. And what I began to realize was this internal battle inside myself with my heart and my head. Maybe this is a battle you have some relationship with as well. So my heart knew, okay? I don't know how I knew, but my heart just knew. Even though I'd never been in a relationship with a woman before, I just knew. But my head reasoned, as heads do. It stayed in that logic space. And it said, are you sure about this? I don't think so. So it was questioning and doubting and denying that I was who I was. It said, you just stay put, little girl. You're fine just where you are. Look at your amazing, beautiful life. So I started listening to my heart and letting her lead. And I would hear my head, and I'm like, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. You're trying to keep me safe. But my heart, I really want to tap into that inner wisdom. Remember that inner wise woman self? Yeah, that really began to serve me and help me find my way to my heart. And folks, this led me to an experience that forever changed me. Okay, it was the simplest of everyday experiences. Guitar lessons. Okay? So I took guitar lessons, and through this musical exchange with this other human being, I felt seen. I don't even think I could say that at the time. I wasn't really sure what it was. I just felt the power of it. And feeling seen by another enabled me to see myself. It enabled me to tap into myself. And it really was the step that took me to being able to claim who I am. So, the second thing, that marriage thing. So it was time to look at my marriage and the emptiness that I began to learn that I was feeling in my marriage, the emotional lack of fulfillment. And now that I was seeing who I am, I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to come face to face with this relationship. And here's what enabled me to acknowledge my fear and take a step. And the step I took was I got in touch. The thing I was most afraid of was hurting the people that I love the most, hurting my husband. I loved him dearly. I just didn't want to be married to him any longer because of who I am. Yeah. So I realized I was already hurting them. So the thing I was fearing, I'm so afraid I'm going to hurt you, I'm already hurting them. Because I was like, half of me was alive. Do you think I'm the only one that saw that? No. I'm sure they saw it. I know they saw it. And so I was already hurting them. I wasn't showing up. I wasn't bringing all of who I am and all I could be. And it was as if that was holding us all hostage in a relationship where we couldn't, none of us were able to be our full selves and experience the love we all deserved. So I mustered up the greatest love I possibly could inside myself. And I sat across from my husband and I told him, I love you so much, but I don't want to be married to you any longer. I need to be in a different kind of relationship with you. And lastly, and I would call this the biggest one, was dealing with my unhealthy relationship with my parents as an adult. You know? And I say the biggest because the others were huge. But the reason this was the biggest to me is because it gets in touch with our upbringing is huge. I had never looked at my upbringing, you all. I had never looked at it. But that conditioning, that conservative, strict, traditional kind of upbringing had me closed. It had me tight. It had me inside a box. It had me fearful of stepping out and really being me, and instead living into identities that were shaped for me by others, and they didn't feel like my own. So it was time. It was time to stand in my power and speak my voice with conviction for what I was feeling and who I am. You know, and so the thing that enabled me to take action was the things I've just told you about. When you start claiming yourself for who you are, when you start making choices like I did in my marriage to say, I love you more than anything, but I can't stay married, this courage just, it's like this light that just wells up inside and emits out, and it enabled me to address this relationship. And so I had a coming out with my parents on many levels. You know, there was the coming out of being gay. There was the coming out of divorcing my husband. There was the coming out of standing in love and against all the prejudices and isms and phobias. It was standing in my power and speaking my voice for all the things that I was learning that I believe, not that somebody else believed and, you know, was put on me and I allowed it to be, but what I believe. Needless to say, I blew my parents' world. I set fire to our relationship as it had always been. But nothing was more important to me than living in my truth. And I had to be in truth with my parents, even though I knew this was likely to happen, and it did. And so we entered into this space now where it's a distanced relationship. And my dad's passed, but I love my mom for who she is and her capacity and what she's capable of. I have a lot of compassion, and it's a daily practice. But loving yourself is about setting boundaries, and it's about standing in your truth and your power. And so I practice living those boundaries every day, and from a place of love, not anger and frustration and resentment, although I'm not perfect in that for sure. So let's bring this all together here. So what I've learned most about being honest with myself and who I am is that the single greatest antidote to fear is what? Do you know it? Courage. To me, the single greatest antidote to fear is courage. And it takes a hell of a lot of courage to slow down, to get still, to look inside. Because when you do that, you're going to see stuff. You're going to see the good stuff about you, the brilliance, the bright light, and you're going to see the hard stuff, the stuff that maybe you haven't been honest about. Maybe you've been telling yourself a story about it, and it's not really true. You're going to see that. And for me, that fear, for so long, so I said about 10 years ago, I was like in my early 40s at that time. That's a long time to live in that place of fear that keeps you from acting and really being yourself. So, and not slowing down enough to notice. But once I did, I could see all the things. Well, not at once, but I'm seeing all the things. And it's an everyday thing. It's an evolving truth journey, right? So I understand why we don't stop and look. I wasn't until that coach program and that peer coach sat across from me and he said, hey, I said, I opened Pandora's box, and once opened, I could see all the things that I was going to have to change in order to be the real me. Folks, it's a lot easier to be unhappy and empty and not fulfilled and just stay the course. This stuff that I'm talking about is the road less traveled. And I'll have to say that from that first moment of my life is boring, it got a lot worse. I thought boring was bad. It got a lot worse before it got better and before it got great. Because, I still have hard stuff in my life now, but it's great because I'm showing up and approaching it with who I really am. When I think about this, I think, isn't this true of any birthing? Think of the birthing. It's labor. I birthed a son, and I'm going to say he was almost 11 pounds, my friends. It's hard. That's why I only have one. I'm good here. But labor is involved for the new birth for me, the new birth for you. And so I cozied up to that fear. I found my courage, and I started to take the steps toward me. And then, lo and behold, I could take the next step, and the next step, and the next, and the next, and the next. Because what I believe is that courage begets courage. That Amelia Earhart knew something. Use your fear. It'll take you to the place where you store your courage. And that's my wish for you. Each and every one of you is that you make your own journey to your courage. Find it. And when you do, slow down enough to look. It's a scary thing. And when you look, I want you to be able to unpack what you're discovering. There's a lot there, and it's complex. It didn't get there easily or simply or overnight, and it won't be that way for you in unpacking it. And when you do, I will promise you this, you'll get closer to knowing yourself, really knowing who you are. And then you'll get closer to being able to live yourself in the world. I know you've heard this before, right? You're the only person like you. You're the only you on the entire planet. I really do believe that's our purpose in life. It's like, if I'm the only me, then I got to get busy. And, here in the middle of my life, I got some urgency about that. I got to get busy living the who I am out in the world to share my gifts. And that's my wish for you, is that you are able to do that. Because you have the power inside you. I can see the essence of that right here in the room never having met you before. You have that power. Don't wait one more day. Thank you.